Welcome, everyone, to the G-Note Podcast. I am your host, Jason Spicy G. Goldman, and I'm a Grammy-winning record producer, arranger, and musician. I've been a music professor at USC for over 22 years, and I am most known for writing and producing music for the iconic crooner, Michael Bublé, over the past 20 years. This is a podcast for musicians who want advice and strategies on navigating the music industry. If you're not a musician but a music fan, I promise there is plenty in here for you as well. On this pod, we talk all things music. On today's pod, we are asking and answering the question, what is jazz? Let's go. All right, everyone, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in once again. Today, I wanted to step away just slightly from music industry stuff, and I thought I would talk about something that was kind of fun and a little bit controversial. And this has been a long debate, probably for a little over a century. And the question is, what is jazz? So let's start with this. Is this even important? Well, personally, I wouldn't say it's important in the grand scheme of things, right? Music is music, and whatever it's called, if you like it, you like it. If you're inspired, you're inspired. If you hate it, you hate it. However, I do feel this is relevant and should be acknowledged. So here goes what I feel jazz is. To begin with, jazz is Black American music. It was derived in the late 19th century in New Orleans, and at its foundation is the blues and work songs. Now, if you look it up, right, it says jazz is widely considered to be the only true American musical art form, although I definitely take issue with that statement, as hip-hop, rock, soul, and country were all born here as well. So that statement's always been a little weird to me. The term jazz, just in general, throughout its history, has always been kind of controversial. Some Black musicians felt the word was hijacked by white musicians and was a type of racial stereotype, for like wild music. However, other Black musicians embraced the word. Duke Ellington, one of the most famous jazz musicians and composers, did not like the word. He claimed that the word had, quote, come to represent an economic ghetto for musical minorities, unquote. And he called his particular music American music. The great trumpet player Miles Davis, in his latter years, was also not fond of the word, and he felt most of the music he played after the 60s was what he called social music. I think it's also important to acknowledge that part of the reason the word jazz seemed to be disliked by some was really because the music was often played in the beginnings, at brothels in the early days, making the word kind of synonymous with, the underground or something negative or derogatory. So what are the exact ingredients of jazz music? If you've ever heard anyone talk about it, they'll tell you it's democracy and it's about working together. I'm not a huge fan of generalities. I like specifics. So here are the three fundamental elements, in my opinion, and a bunch of research, of course, that I feel make up jazz music. One, it's heavily based on the blues and the blues vibe and sound. Two, there is a substantial amount of improvisation. And three, the swing groove. I personally feel that not acknowledging these three elements is a bit disrespectful to jazz and the music as a whole. To be clear, that doesn't mean that a particular music isn't good, but it's hard to say it's jazz music without these three elements. And I'll even go a step further. There has been improvisation in almost every type of music since the dawn of time. Even a ton of Bach's music was improvised. The blues is found in work songs and was not only borrowed by jazz, but rock also and country music. And that leaves one element left, which really defines jazz, really, which is the swing groove. The element that truly makes something jazz music, in my opinion, is the swing groove. Here is a classic example of the swing groove. And, this is the groove is really defined by the way the cymbal is hit. Bing, ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding. Sometimes you hear spang-a-lang, spang, spang-a-lang, spang-a-lang. But let me play you this groove. And you're going to hear right now is the great Jimmy Cobb on probably the most famous jazz album of all time, Kind of Blue. Man, it just has this feel about it that no other music to me has. Let me play one more example of a swing feel now. And this one doesn't necessarily have the spang-a-lang that you heard on the cymbal, but this one has this infectious groove. This one is the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra playing a Duke Ellington song called Happy Go Lucky. Now, there are a ton of albums I could play to describe swing. So for all of you jazz purists, you're like, why are you playing Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra with Duke Ellington? Because when you hear it, you'll get what I'm saying. It's just super swinging. But I feel this is a great representation of swing. And the groove, in general, is about the forward motion and the quote-unquote bump. Damn, that is so swinging. Yeah, that was Happy Go Lucky Local. For those that are not aware, the bass does this thing called walking, right? Doom, 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 doom. So it's basically quarter notes. And what they're doing is they're quote unquote walking notes of the harmony of the song. And that's what gives it the forward motion. And I always say, if I could bottle this feeling up, I would share it with everyone, and everyone would be swinging every time. But it's not necessarily easy to do until you really get inside the groove. Anyone can play the ding, ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding, right? Everyone can play that, but the feel of it is a totally different thing, which is why I try to differentiate between the actual groove, what it is, and the actual feel. And those who play jazz music, it's synonymous, but it's not an easy thing to do. The swing feel is the feeling coming from the drum groove and the walking bass, right? It's where they play their notes and how they line up together. So I know it sounds a little bit weird, but it's hard to describe a feel because this is a particular feel. But hopefully that gives you some insight with those two examples and just knowing what the swing groove is. I don't know any other style of music that has this feel or bump, which is why I, go back to what I said initially, that in the end, when it comes down to what is jazz, it's that swing feel. And by the way, there are other songs that have the swing feel in them that aren't just, ding, ding, da, ding. You can have that same sense of bumping. But there's only one genre that really has that, which is jazz. Let me discuss why I think, it's important to define jazz and why I chose to do this episode. And please hear me out, because I know some of you are like, that's, jazz this and that. I mean, I get it. I've heard all the arguments. Obviously, I've been doing this for a very long time. Everyone today has such a huge problem with labeling anything. And I get it. Everyone wants to be unique and not have barriers and not be confined to a genre, so to speak. But I say, what is the problem with barriers and being categorized? When you go into a store, things are categorized for several reasons. One, it makes things makes finding things, in this case, music, easier. If you know you like a specific type of music and you search that music genre, that genre should come up, and hopefully you'll find things in there that you can relate to because you like that genre. Each genre, number two, has different foundational elements. If you were to try and combine elements, you would now have a reference as to where things come from. For an example, if you're talking to the drummer, hey, let's do a rock tune, but with a hip hop groove. Most musicians would easily know what you are talking about. Now, again, there's thousands of rock and hip hop grooves, but they have references to go by. And, number three, since when did being in a genre of music become a bad thing? It doesn't mean you can't play any other genre of music or that you cannot listen to any other genre. It's simply just a reference for people to know where to find you. Again, I know I've said this a couple times, but to be clear, as you know, if you listen to this show often, I love most music. I don't care what genre the music is in. I just know if I like it or not. Barriers are also not always a bad thing. For example, when you practice an instrument, you typically don't practice anything you want anytime you want. In order to get something worked out or practiced, you create a barrier. You confine yourself so that you can focus on a particular element to improvise on. We also live in barriers, right? A house. We don't live in open air, or most of us don't. By the way, there's tons of jazz influenced music. Jazz has been blended with Latin music, Cuban music, jazz fusion, which is like jazz and rock combined, jazz and hip hop. But I think it should be really clear. Jazz has its own thing, and rightfully so. Most instrumental music, to be honest with you, is not jazz. Yes, there is smooth jazz. And by the way, I do love smooth jazz. But honestly, it's really not jazz. Most of it is pop-influenced instrumental music. Now, that's a really long thing, pop-influenced instrumental music, so why not just call it smooth jazz? It may be good music, but it ain't jazz. Again, to be clear, I'm a big fan of crossing genres and trying to find new sounds and music and being unique. I also try and cross genres a lot in the music that I make. If you listen to my record, my 2022 record, There's Only One, it's a jazz-based album fused with modern production techniques. So I don't want people to think that I'm not into other types of music and that I don't love it. My point here is to point out that or what jazz is and give credit to those that created this music and what is foundational in their music that they created. Honestly, to me, and Duke Ellington said it best, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And the only music that swings is jazz. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today's episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this pod so you can stay up to date with new shows, giveaways, and more importantly, the concerts. I know we have a concert coming up very soon at the Vibrato Jazz Club. You should come out and see us. It's going to be a ton of fun. I always have great singers singing. You can check us out. You can follow me actually at Spicy G Music on Instagram, or you can head over to my website, jasongoldmanmusic.com, to see what projects I'm currently working on and to see when and where I'll be performing next. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Much love. Peace.